In today's video, we are on the M62 motorway in Cheshire, near to the town of Warrington. Depending on when you were born, you may only know this place as being a massive industrial estate. I'm sure many of you will know this place by the motorway service station that is there. You may even be old enough to remember it as being the old RAF airbase, where the industrial estate and motorway service station now stand. We're going to be looking at all of those things. But also we're going to be looking at knocking something down, which in hindsight has become problematic. Let's discuss it. One the trucker's eye! This is the motorway service station at Burtonwood. It's just one of a number of things that have been built on the site of the former RAF base. We do need to talk about this motorway service station a bit later in the video, but first let's take a look at that former RAF base that was Burtonwood. RAF Burtonwood was an airfield built between 1938 and 1940. It was initially used by the RAF and later on by the US after they'd entered the Second World War.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The Burtonwood site being primarily used for maintaining and supplying other US bases throughout the UK. Following the end of the Second World War, Burtonwood was returned to the RAF. The US, however, retained a significant presence within the airbase for many years to come. The US Air Force had vacated the base in 1965, and the US Army moved back into Burtonwood, storing war supplies in 1967. However, it was the very late 80s to the very early 90s that I first remember the site being used.
I have a statement by the President of the United States. The liberation of Kuwait has begun. In conjunction with the forces of our coalition partners, the United States has moved under the code name Operation Desert Storm.
Despite being bisected by the M62 in the 1970s, Burtonwood as an army base was still ongoing. It had once again become a crucial supply hub, but this time for the 1991 Gulf War. The Burtonwood Army Depot was declared excess to NATO requirements and finally closed in June 1994. Some of the buildings within the site then became warehousing. This is a great old photograph alongside the M62 showing one of the hangars being used by a haulage company called Swindle. A little detective work around the internet will also bring you to other photographs which clearly show the hangar just visible behind these tractor units. In this aerial photograph you'll notice that same hangar towards the top of the photograph. To the right is the M62 with Manchester in the northerly direction as you look at the photograph. Burtonwood as an airbase had 3 runways, 2 shorter ones and a much longer runway. You can quite clearly see one of the shorter runways close to the hangars at the top of the screen. Slightly more to the centre of the photograph you'll notice a taxiway, and on this taxiway you may well notice 2 articulated lorries. Those 2 articulated trucks are there with a flatbed trailer, as this was once one of the places you used to go to learn to drive a HGV. You used to practice reversing around the cones and into the garage that you have to do on your HGV test. Here in the modern day of 2025, this is what you'll find if you're travelling westbound on the M62. This is Junction 8, and Junction 8 was constructed in 2003. Prior to that, you might have seen something like this. Following the construction of the M62 in the 1970s, this was all that was left of the main runway that run through the Burtonwood Air Force Base. Liverpool would be straight ahead. So next time you drive along the M62 close to Junction 8, you might be aware that you were driving on what was a former runway of an RAF base. You may even work at the Omega Warrington site and be completely unaware of the history that's beneath your feet. So let's take a look at what's there in the modern day. Omega Warrington is the name given to the huge industrial site that now occupies the former RAF Burtonwood site. It really is a who's who of big business in the UK in 2025. The smallest part of the Omega site is called Omega North and sits on the same side of the motorway as the Burtonwood service area. Travis Perkins, City Plumbing, Every Parcels, Scania Group and also Briggs Food Service are the companies on this side of the motorway. Omega South is on the left of the motorway. Straight away you'll notice THG. This is the Hut Group. And just beyond the Hut Group you'll notice the newest addition to the whole of the Omega site, TJ Morris, better known to you and I as Home Bargains. They actually call this a mega shed, and it seems to have taken quite a while in the building process. The site may be mostly empty at the moment, but it is actually ready to start rolling into action over the coming weeks. We'll get to look at some of the other huge companies that occupy Omega South by going back to Junction 8 and heading towards Burtonwood services. At this point we're on the roundabout of Junction 8 of the M62. Omega South is on the left. You'll see trucks emerging from depots that are based at that site. Companies such as the Royal Mail and Amazon who have more than one warehouse on the Omega site. This ambient as the depot at Omega in Warrington really does need calling out. Trucks are regularly stuck in there for 3 to 4 hours just to deliver the load of goods that they take in there. The cost to hauliers must be astronomical. Other notable companies on the Omega South site include such companies as Domino's, OP Mobility, Jürgen, the Delivery Group and Iceland Foods, along with many others. And it's that fact that there are so many massive companies at the Omega site as to why we need to talk about the motorway service station. It is amazing, however, how this roundabout is able to cope as well as it does, with so much traffic going into both sides of the industrial area. Not to mention the massive retail area that houses the likes of IKEA and Marks and Spencer's, which is just over to the right as we go round this roundabout. You can't fail to notice how brilliantly positioned this motorway service station is for that industrial area, especially when it's that size. And that is one of the things we're going to talk about when we get into the services. If you frequently pass Burtonwood services on the M62, you'll no doubt recognise this building. This is the concourse for where the shops are in the services. This actual building was designed by architect Patrick Gwynn and is very distinctive because of its conical roof. This section of the M62 was opened in 1973 and the services came along in August 1974. Ironically, if you were to visit this services, you'd probably think that they'd never been updated since 1974. In 2019, the Motorway Services User Survey found that Burtonwood Services was the second bottom services in the UK for customer satisfaction. As far as truck parking goes at the services, there isn't enough spaces by half. This isn't helped by the parking basically being a free-for-all, as you can see. Not to mention the old Shearing's coach parking, which I've never seen more than one bus parking at any time. Maybe somebody in the comments can let me know if this still gets used as a bus station. One of the reasons for the inadequate amount of spaces for HGV parking overnight could be traced back to 2008. If we were to bring back our photograph from earlier on, you'll notice that along the M62 there were two of these conical roof buildings, and that's because prior to 2008 there were actually 2 motorway service stations, one on either side of the road. At the time, the service station wasn't doing very well. Without going into the whole story at too much length, there was a compromise reached between Welcome Break, the owners of the service station, and the developers behind the new retail parks. This saw the closure in 2008 of the westbound service area, with all traffic wanting to use the motorway service area being diverted in and out via the newly built Junction 8. So if you ever do wonder why you can't park your truck at night in Burtonwood services because there isn't enough space, that is because half of it was taken away. There's a certain area knocking down the service station just as they were about to build Omega Warrington, one of the UK's biggest industrial sites. But surely these days, with only one motorway service station and now in such a prime location, Welcome Break would be able to move the services forward and at least update some of it. Instead, it offers very little, especially for truck drivers. What you can see on screen now is what is now built on the site of the old motorway service station. If you have parked on the Burtonwood site overnight as a truck driver, the only choice of meal you'll have is a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I dare say Welcome Break are going to start updating that services when there's a retail park on the other side of the motorway. For truck drivers though, this means a walk down a long dark road. But here's the thing, you may have noticed in this photograph earlier from the westbound site that has now been demolished, the sign saying underpass. Despite the westbound site being demolished, the underpass is still in existence to this very day, and here it is. Unfortunately these days it is all closed off, but wouldn't it be nice if you were stuck at the motorway service station as a truck driver and you didn't fancy a KFC, that you could just walk under that underpass and go to the retail park? They're not going to let you do that though, are they? Just a couple of quick things before we end this video. Let's take a ride through the lorry park and show you the state of the parking area for trucks. During its history, the Burtonwood airbase was visited by Bing Crosby, Glenn Miller and Bob Hope. And here's the actual picture of Bob Hope stepping off the plane at Burtonwood. Maybe they could change the name from Burtonwood Services to Hope, because when you finally arrive here, you've got to hope. I'll see you all next time. One trucker's eye.